Hi, friends. I'm going to continue reading to you from Friendship According to Humphrey. We are still on chapter 1. So, when we were reading, Humphrey and Miss Brisbane were on their way back from their winter break, and the whole classroom had changed. The desk used to be in rows, and now they were in groups, and there was a new student. The new girl seemed scared, scared, scared as she got up and stood next to Miss Brisbane. This is Tabitha Clark, and I want you all to welcome her. Tabitha, why don't you tell us something about yourself? The new girl looked down and shook her head. Mrs. Brisbane quickly turned back to the class. We'll do that later. Now, who would you like to be in charge of show and tell? Who would like to be in charge of showing Tabitha around today? Me! A voice called out. Of course, it was Raise Your Hand, Heidi Hooper, who always forgets to raise her hand. Hands, please, Heidi. I think Mandy had her hand up first. Mandy, will you be Tabitha's buddy? I expect each of you to introduce yourself to Tabitha and include her in your activities. She turned to the girl. I know you'll make lots of good friends in room 26. You may sit down now. The girl kept staring down at the floor as she returned to her seat. She looked as if she needed a friend. I was so busy watching her, I only half listened to what Mrs. Brisbane was saying. Was she really talking about poultry? Hmm. After all, this is Longfellow School, she said, and I hope you know Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was a famous American poet. Poetry! Nothing to do with chickens or turkeys, thank goodness. I have to admit, I'm a little scared of things with feathers ever since my early days at Pet-O-Rama. I still have nightmares about the day a large green parrot escaped and flung himself at my cage, screeching, Yum, yum, time to eat! Back? He was still shrieking as Carl, the store clerk, carried him away. That unpleasant memory was interrupted when someone blurted, I'm a poet and I don't know it. My feet show it. They're Longfellows. I heard that, Kirk, said Mrs. Brisbane. Now, as I was saying, much of this term will be spent reading and writing poetry. The groans, were loud. I guess some people are afraid of poetry, even without feathers. Seth squirmed in his seat and pretended to pound his head on the table. Poetry! He moaned. Sit still, Seth, said Mrs. Brisbane. Sitting still wasn't easy for Seth. Now that he was practically right in front of me, I could see him wiggling and jiggling in his chair, which made Gail Morgenstern laugh. Stop giggling, Gail, Mrs. Brisbane warned. Gail stopped giggling and started hiccuping. Please go get a drink of water, Mrs. Brisbane told her, and she turned to the new girl. Tabitha, please put that toy away. Everybody stared at Tabitha, including me. She was cradling a scruffy stuffed bear in her arms. The gray had cotton coming out of his ears and wore washed out blue overalls with a button missing. Even his smile seemed a little faded. Now, please, said Mrs. Brisbane. It was quiet in the room, thank goodness. I'm afraid if Gail had been there, we would have heard peals of laughter and heaps of hiccups. Tabitha slid Shabby Bear into the slot in her table without a word. Right about then, Principal Morales marched through the door. Sorry for interrupting, Mrs. Brisbane. I just wanted to personally welcome you all back to school. The principal looked spiffy with a tie that had little pencils all over it. He always wore a tie because he was the most important person at Longfellow School. Thank you, Mr. Morales, said Miss Brisbane. We have a new student, Tabitha Clark, and a whole new setup for our class, as you can see. Welcome, Tabitha, said the principal. I'm sure you'll love it here in room 26. I'm glad to see our friend Humphrey is back as well. He walked all the way across the classroom to my cage. Glad to see you. I squeaked in my loudest squeak, but it came out as squeak, squeak, squeak. Hi, old pal, he greeted me. He turned back to the rest of the class. You can all learn a lot from Humphrey, and I wish you all a very successful semester. As he left, I turned my attention back to Tabitha. She was still staring straight down. I could see her face clearly, but it was almost as red as her copper-colored hair. I guess I watched her a long time because suddenly the recess bell rang. Come on, Tabitha, let's get our coats, Mandy said. Tabitha slipped the stuffed bear into her pocket and followed Mandy to the cloakroom. As soon as the students were gone, Miss Loomis bustled into the room. Two pink dots of excitement colored her cheeks and her curls bounced in all directions. Are you ready? Should we do it? She asked Miss Brisbane. Why not? My teacher answered. I'll make room for him now. They walked over to the table in the front of the window where my cage sits. Sure, he'll fit right there, said Mrs. Loomis, pointing to a spot near my house. Miss Brisbane slid some of my supplies down to the end of the table. Now you're sure he's not a lot of trouble? Oh no, not nearly as much trouble as a hamster. What? Not nearly as much trouble as a hamster? Since when have I caused any trouble in room 26? Since when did I totally not dedicate myself to helping my classmates and my teacher? Surprisingly, Miss Brisbane didn't correct her. I was about to squeak up myself when the bell rang and Miss Loomis scurried out of the room. I wondered who wasn't as much trouble as I am. He, Miss Loomis had said. He who? Curiosity made my whiskers twitch and my paws tingle. My fur was practically standing on the end of the tables as the tables filed up. I saw Tabitha slip her bear out of her pocket. Heidi saw it too and rolled her eyes at Gail, who almost giggled but managed to stop herself. Now, class, I told you there were some changes in our room this year, Miss Brisbane announced. Another one of these changes is a brand new classroom pet. I think he'll add a lot to room 26. New classroom pet? Why did she want a new classroom pet? She already had a wonderful, terrific classroom pet. Was I being replaced? Miss Loomis entered carrying a large glass tank. I couldn't see what was in because my classmates were standing up, oohing and awing. It's a frog! Shouted Heidi. Miss Loomis set the glass box right next to my cage. Now I could already see some water, rocks, and something green, and something really, really lumpy. Meet our new frog, Miss Brisbane. Miss Loomis will tell you all about him. Well, boys and girls, as you may know, we have a frog in our classroom. His name is George, and he's a bullfrog. Right before the holidays, one of our students brought in this frog to keep George company. We named him Og the Frog. Unfortunately, George didn't like Og, and being a bullfrog, George let us know he didn't like Og by making a lot of noise. That upset Og, I guess, because he would leap and splash all day while George was croaking. My classmates laughed, but I didn't. On one paw, I could see why George didn't want another frog to compete with him. On the other paw, croaking at Og wasn't a very friendly way to act. With all the noise, we were having trouble getting in any work done. So I asked Miss Brisbane if your class would like to have Og, and she said yes. He's a very quiet frog. Do you like him? My friends all yelled, yes! Everyone except for Tabitha, who was secretly petting her little bear. Somebody went, ribbit, ribbit, in a funny croaking voice, and it wasn't the frog. I heard that, Kirk. That's quite enough. Og can provide the sound effects from now on. I think he'll make a nice friend for Humphrey, Mrs. Brisbane said. A friend for me? At least he wasn't my replacement. Whew. But I was already friends with every single person in room 26, so I didn't really need a new friend. After Miss Loomis left, Miss Brisbane let the students have a closer look at Og. Seth tapped at the glass. Don't do that, Seth. He doesn't seem frightened of anything, Miranda observed. I think he's smiling, said Kirk. That must mean he's hoppy. For once, Gail didn't giggle, which seemed to bother Kirk. Get it? Hoppy? Happy? Gail rolled her eyes. Miss Brisbane called to the new girl. Come see Og, Tabitha. Tabitha stared down at her table and shook her head no. Come on, Tabitha, Mandy said. Again, Tabitha shook her head. She hasn't wanted to do anything all day, Mandy grumbled. Mandy, Miss Brisbane warned her. Is he really a frog? Richie stared hard at Og. Don't frogs live in water? Some do, said Miss Brisbane, and some frogs live in trees. Og is a common green frog. He likes to live near water, but not in it. That's why he has a tank that's half water and half land. A common green frog doesn't sound very interesting, but Og had certainly attracted the attention of my classmates. Can I take care of Og? AJ asked. Lower your voice, AJ, said Miss Brisbane. We will all take care of him. Once the students returned to their seats, Miss Brisbane held up a book on the care of frogs. We'll have to study this, she explained. Taking care of Og will be quite different from caring for Humphrey. After all, Humphrey is a warm-blooded mammal. Og is a cold-blooded amphibian. Amphibian? That's nothing like a mammal. The very word made my warm blood run cold. I hoped that she would never, ever put that word on a spelling test. Miss Brisbane looked through the book. Aha, she said. It says that the common green frog is a medium-sized frog with a calm nature. It makes a distinctive sound. Boing! I almost fell off my ladder. What on the earth could that noise be? Then I heard another sound, the laughter of my classmates. Boing! This time the noise was clearly coming from the frog. What kind of noise was that? Aren't frogs supposed to say ribbit? Miss Brisbane turned towards Og's glass box. Thank you for the demonstration, Og. Then I heard boing, boing, boing. It didn't come from the frog this time. I heard that, Kirk, said the teacher. She continued to talk about amphibians and their life cycle. What does he eat? Hands, please, Heidi. Mostly insects. Cool, said Kirk. Everybody in the class groaned. Ew! When I finished gagging, I squeaked, Live insects! Not that anyone could hear me. At the end of the day, as the students gathered up their books and coats and filed past our tables, at least half of them said, Bye, Og, or Catch you later, Augie. Not one of my classmates said goodbye to me. I guess they all forgot. Mandy stayed for a minute after class. Miss Spain, you told me to be friendly to that new girl, but she isn't very friendly back. Don't complain, Mandy, said the teacher. It's not easy to be the new kids in class. Put yourself in her shoes. Give her some time. After all, we've got the whole semester ahead of us. A whole semester ahead of us, and I had to spend it with a frog? Miss Spain had shaken things up all right, and I felt queasy all over again. Okay, that is the end of chapter 1.